Oh, hey, I'm doing a little track day prep on the SLK 350. I'll share what I'm doing to get it ready for its first day on the track in a little bit. But first, take a look at a recent chance I had to get behind the wheel of something a little more Italian. My thoughtful wife has long endured my vehicular fascination, and she recently surprised me with an opportunity to take my choice of a Lamborghini Gallardo or Ferrari 430 for a few laps around a short track. She's a good woman. My experience was brief, but with the Gallardo having 6 more cylinders than the only Italian car I've ever owned, it was thrilling. Now I can cross driving a Lambo off my bucket list. Oh hey, you're back. Listen, I've got a little more work to do, but while I finish up, maybe you want to hear some of my first impressions of my first month of ownership. In selecting the right used car to serve as my track toy, of course I wanted to get something that performed like a fighter plane. But like any used car buyer, I hoped I wasn't getting a dinosaur. So after putting my machine into the wild for a few weeks, how do I feel? I'm really enjoying the car. I feel lucky to have found what I think so far is a really solid example of this vehicle. The pluses, the engine is more than powerful enough for what I want to do with this car on the road, and I think it's going to be more than powerful enough for my skill level on the track. There is plenty of torque, and coming out of turbocharged cars, it's really an enjoyable car to wring out the gears, particularly in that second and third gear high RPM ranges, and feel that smooth torque band. There's no turbo lag, obviously. That's a different feeling than coming out of the last several cars I've owned that obviously relied on turbocharging to generate a little extra horsepower. In terms of handling, the car feels solid. With the top up, you wouldn't know it's a convertible, and the chassis feels good in the corners. The car feels stiff, it stays flat. I'll be interested to see how it does at the higher speeds in a track environment. But for road driving so far, and just the experiences that I've had from seat of the pants assessment, it feels like a really good, solid car to throw into corners, and I think it's going to handle well. The proportions feel good. I didn't feel right about the Z4s that I drove, or the Audi TT, or even some of the driving position of the Porsche Boxster. None of those cars felt as natural to me as this car has felt. The Boxster, certainly, it's known for its handling, and I experienced in the couple of examples of that car that I drove that it's certainly got its advantages of being a mid-engine car, but the driving position of this car feels good. It feels better to me. You're sitting straighter in the SLK 350 than I did in the Boxsters that I drove, which had a bit of a shifted pedal position. The Z4, which had been a GT car for me in the 2 iterations that I owned, didn't feel like the right proportions for what I wanted to do on the track, and I've shared that in some previous episodes. So this car kind of so far has the mix of what I'm looking for. It feels like a balance between something that I'll be able to throw into some corners on the track and also be able to get some good straight line speed out of. In terms of the shifter, the gearbox, the clutch, they all feel good in this vehicle. They feel strong. It's been years since I've driven a manual car as a daily driver, but this gearbox feels good. It feels solid. I was a little disappointed in the 986 Boxsters that I had driven. The throws were really long in that gearbox, and the manual transmission didn't feel as smooth as I had read it was supposed to. But in this car, I've been pleasantly surprised. And as I get better at being smoother with my use of a manual gearbox again, I think this is a good car for me to get strong with on the track, and it's a great gearbox to row up and down the gears with. There are some negatives. The driving position, while good and more in line with the pedal position than maybe the 986 Boxsters that I've driven, I never feel like I can get the right distance between me and the pedals while also being set up with the wheel and the shifter. So it's a little bit of a sacrifice, even with the great adjustments that the seat has to offer and the tilt and the slide adjustments that the seat has. I feel like I'm either too close to the pedals or too far from the wheel, and it's never quite right. And there's a lot of rattling and squeaking in the car. You might hear some of that. The hardtop has a little more noise than some of the hardtops I'm used to from cars I've owned previously, so maybe some grease or some adjustments will fix that. That's something I've yet to tackle. but it is an older car. It's got a little age on it. I expect to have a few squeaks and rattles here and there, but it's a little noisy at speed, and a little bit of cracking and squeaking and rattling going on from the top as well as the top cover that's in here. All in all, I've been really happy with the SLK 350. It's been a great balance of power and handling, and I'm looking forward to taking it out on the track and learning a little more about how the car handles and deciding on what's next for this vehicle as it gets turned into my track machine. So, what have I done? Well, the last time I did my own brakes, there were two ways to stop your car: brake pads and ditches. Now there's carbon this and ceramic that. The choice of brake pads these days is dizzying. When selecting the right pad for my track vehicle, I wanted a balance between something that was fade resistant on the speeds I'll be doing on the track, but also not too bitey or noisy on the street. Next was replacing all the OEM original brake fluid with DOT 5.1 brake fluid. This is a fluid that has a higher boiling point, in this case 516 degrees. And that's important because I'll be using my brakes hard in the track. I'll be driving at high speeds and I'll be relying on those brakes to stop me. And a lower temperature brake fluid can have a tendency to boil inside the brake lines under stress. And I don't want to boil the brake fluid because that introduces air into the lines, and that air can create a mushy brake pedal, and a mushy brake pedal is not good when you're going 100 miles an hour. So this process involves emptying all the old brake fluid out of the master cylinder and then going wheel by wheel and bleeding each of the lines, replacing all the old fluid with brand new, fresh, high temperature brake fluid. And then last, because I probably spent as much time wrestling and banging my wheels off the car as I did changing pads and fluid, I put some anti-seize lubricant on each of the hubs. And the advantage of this is I hope the next time I have to remove my wheels and do service on the car, I don't have to wrestle the wheels off the car. A little bit of this on each wheel hub means I won't have to call the Hulk the next time I change my brakes. Because my first track day with this car is just about learning its limits, my first service isn't some big performance upgrade, but rather a safety inspection of the suspension and tires, as well as making sure my most important system, the brakes, works like it should. The pads that came with this car had plenty of life left in them, but as I said, I wanted a more track-ready pad composition so that hard stops and heavy braking weren't going to be an issue. When replacing the pads, I had trouble getting the new pins that came with the new pads to fit. I realized the tip of the new pins were longer than the OEM versions, hence my issue with getting them to seat. I ended up using the original pins with no issues. After busting my knuckles getting the wheels off and back on, and the process being done on all four wheels, each bolt getting torqued to 80 foot-pounds per factory spec, the car is ready to be tested on some fast straights and sweeping apexes. Next, on Between the Wheels, I'll share footage from my first day on the track with the SLK 350. I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs on the track, and to deciding what my next performance modifications will be based on how the car reveals its strengths and its weaknesses in a track environment. See you next time. Next, on Between the Wheels, I'll close this door.